Yeah, I
And
wouldn't say
we
that on
are
stream.
live. Yeah, you wouldn't say that on stream and then we kick off the stream live. Oh man, I am so glad that you all joined us for this stream. We are talking smart appliances, and we were just talking actually before the stream started, just some of this just ridiculous stories from car hacking to smart fridges actually just having malicious malware in them, which are now getting plugged into homes. But they've just kind of taken over so much of our houses. I noticed yesterday, and I take very smart decisions in what I do, but I noticed I have like 115 systems which have pulled an IP address inside my house, and now I'm trying to figure out what some of those are. In my office, I know I have about 15 because every light has its own IP address, which is a little terrifying. But we're getting into some of the network segmentation. With that, I wanted to say hi, welcome back, Gator, Gauri,
Hello.
Gulo. How's everyone
How's
doing?
it going?
Having a good day. Having a good day. Watched some Adventure Time this morning, and that usually starts my day off pretty well. I accidentally got to not accidentally. I was not paying attention to the line of episodes in Adventure Time, and I went right off the end of the series without expecting it, and I was so incredibly sad when that happened. I was like, no, I need more. Sorry,
Oh.
that's been my couple of weeks. I've just been dealing with the end of Adventure Time.
Hey, Taylor. Thank you for joining. I don't know why your
You're
text
welcome.
is green. That's a carryover from Hot Wings, I think. Hackers and Hot Wings. Almost like we have the whole stream like organized the settings. That countdown fools you like we actually know what we're doing. Yeah, it's actually funny because that countdown is, while I think it's very nice for the stream, it's much more for us because you think during the stream, like right before it starts, we're all organized and Gator and Gulo don't join 10 seconds before we go live. It was legitimately 10 seconds before the timer went up. But no one would know that. We just assume Gulo has a master plan.
I'm generally the first one here. There's only once or twice where I pull a Gator and I'm like, okay, it's going live. Click join now.
Yes, I apologize.
It's better than what I did last week to Gator. So when we were doing the Hackers and Hot Wings, I don't even know if I explained it on stream, but in short, my plan was because I kind of surprised everyone with all the countdowns, and I pushed the countdowns, and then my joke was that the whole stream is now organized. We have all these fancy overlays, and I threw it to Gator to go, okay, and roll the intro, thinking that he was going to just freeze and go, I don't have an intro. And I was going to be like, yeah, we fooled you guys, like thinking we have our crap together. And Gator just rolls with it. He goes right into like this big introduction, and I was like, "Whoa!" Like he knows exactly what he's doing. Gator,
Like,
how are you?
If you go back to that and you can see the eyebrows went up as like the slight terror and rolling with it. Just keep it there. Everything's fine. We have this under control. Just fake it till you make it, baby.
Oh gosh, that's great, Jailer. I'm glad these little changes we've been doing is improving it. But let's jump in. Do you guys want to start with? I think one of the interesting ones would be like, what smart appliances you currently have in your house, and who wants to start?
That's definitely top secret. I definitely don't have like that. You can see it in the background on the bottom, right? There you go. This is hard to do. That's
Right?
I have the Google Smart Home Wi-Fi routers, just the routers, not the speakers. But they are a mesh. That's a mesh network, and that means I have like the Google Home integration thing, so I can control my home from my smartphone, for example. And what else do I have? I don't have any smart lights, although I've been thinking about it, and I have contractors in the house right now putting ceiling speakers in, which
Nice.
I will eventually be able to have that integrated with Google Home to be able to go, play Taylor Swift in my office, type thing. So,
Kesha.
yeah, or Kesha. But I think that's the extent of my current like smart appliances, but we also just bought this house and we do have plans. But we have not, as we discuss more of them, I keep thinking like, all right, what do I actually want on the network?
Oh,
How about you,
goodness.
Gator?
So I've got a funny feeling about that. Early on, I'm like, there's not going to be any smart devices whatsoever in my home. And then I'm like, that's a really old school way of looking at it. And if we're supposed to be practicing security and somebody's doing the loop-de-loo with different... Anyway, with that, the whole idea about should we be using these in our homes or not? And I decided, okay, let's start dipping the big toe in. But before, I want to make sure I understand my network. So doing the whole inventory of what is on your home, and then what classifies as a smart appliance or an IoT device. And I want to jump more into that because for me, I then went and segmented my entire home network into 5 different sub networks with VLANs and making sure that they don't touch each other. Yes, I know there's a quest about something on this, so go ahead, Gulo, if you want to jump in.
VLANs are not security barriers.
Right.
For the love of God, say you're using ACLs. You have ACLs on your VLANs to segment your traffic.
So this guy's a noob, and he's learning as he goes. So I've gone through and made sure I've got my firewall set up to where they can't see each other. I haven't seen about ACLs yet. So I would be happy to talk with you to see what I can go through and do that side of the house.
Yes, hit me up and I'll help you set that up so that your VLANs don't communicate, because breaking out of VLANs is fairly trivial.
Well, I mean, you had the quest, and that's where I'm like, go ahead.
For any black hats listening, your window of hacking Gator is slowly closing.
I was going to say, it's about...
So get in while you can.
So for me, going through and segmenting it to where they can't see each other was a big deal before I started implementing them. I had a security system. In fact, with my Synology, I go through and I host as much items as I can here at home. So I have a security system that's self-hosted. I've got a couple smart light bulbs in the lab only. I don't put any smart things in the rest of my home because I want to see what traffic and where it's reaching out to. I don't have my light on.
No, I was going to Gulo. Sorry, we're having some back end few things going on, so I'm fixing them as Gator's talking. But I think
it's
we're
all in
good
the back
now.
end, and I just gave it away. So
yeah, I know. All of our secret communication is now leaked.
So where my smart devices are still in the boxes. So the Echo is still in the box. The Google Home is still in the box. I'm actually more leaning towards the Tekken stuff to where you can go through and flash Tasmodo onto it, and then all of your traffic stays local only. I haven't decided to implement a smart AI or a smart device, whether it's Mycroft for the more open source side, because when we talk about IoTs, which once everybody else has talked about, I want to see what you guys classify as IoT. And then if you're looking to home host your own, to what degree does that start and stop?
Yeah, so
I'll throw it over.
Yeah, I'll jump in with a few. I actually didn't think I had a lot, but then the more I sat here thinking about it, I have a ton of smart appliances. We'll say smart appliances or IoT. The way I'm defining them is anything that pulls an IP address which isn't clearly a server or like an embedded device. I mean, that's a really wide definition. But so I wouldn't include like a Raspberry Pi because it runs like a full operating system, but anything that runs like BusyBox or any sort of embedded system, I'm kind of tossing into that category.
I think it's pretty simple, right? So it's anything that isn't designed to literally be a computer that has a computer in it, right? So a fridge, a washer and dryer, light bulbs. Yeah, any of those things I think classify as a smart appliance, right? Because it is an appliance that is now smart because you put a computer in it, right? And I hate I hate the term smart appliance. I hate the term smart because most of the time they're really dumb in many, many, many ways. They're really, really dumb. But yeah, I think that classifies it. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, no, you're good. I noticed another weird glitch I'm gonna have to fix afterwards. But so I realized I have a lot of them. Like, all my life, actually sort of fun is I got to do a security assessment on, this was like in a previous life, on these lights in my office, which was really, really cool. But it also gave me a shameless excuse to just buy a ridiculous amount of them because they're not cheap. Like, they were like $70 for like 2 lights.
I was actually at Home Depot the other day and just getting a smart switch, right? One that just to turn your existing lights on and off or control the dimmer from your phone, whatever. A normal dimmer switch is like $5-10, maybe 12, 15. I don't know, somewhere in that range. A smart switch is like $50 or more. And like, these things are not that complicated. I could, I don't want to burn my house down, so I won't, but I could make one of these, right?
Yep.
With they sell these smart, or the processors that go in these things. I could make them myself, but as I said, not an electrical engineer. I would burn my house down, so I'm not going to do that. But it feels like an absurd ripoff for what you're getting. Like, what you're really paying that $50 for is like the app access, the software support. And it just feels like for the amount of money, it doesn't feel like enough money to be really confident in the security of the product. But it also feels like if it were $100, people wouldn't buy it. Right. But what that means is that if you're buying it at like 50 or 40 or 30, how many are they really selling of these things? And as a result of that, how much time and effort can they really put into assessing the security of any one of these products or the application or, whatever? And that's the economic thing for me, is thinking about this. Security is a business decision for everybody. People make business decisions as to whether or not to put money into securing their software, right? And they go, well, what's the risk of somebody's light bulb getting popped by a hacker? Probably not really anything relevant. They might be able to pop the light bulb or whatever, but they're not going to have, access to be able to like modulate the power in the lines because it's only pulling power, right? So like the risk is low. So they're like, whatever. If they want to hack a light bulb, they can hack a light bulb. We're not going to get sued over it. And that's what scares me.
You bring up such a interesting idea. Yeah, Taylor, that's awesome. Two outlets. Like, I actually have 2 outlets which I was controlling. So I did crypto mining for a little bit. And when I was doing it when I wanted to have sometimes they would just crash and they'd hard crash. So I actually had servers getting turned hard switch over and hard turn on just to hard boot the thing. Because even the hypervisor would go. All those mining systems are notoriously horribly unstable because you overclock and things like that. So those outlets are super helpful. But something that Gowrie mentioned was a lot of these devices, they don't have to worry about security because they're in, we'll say, a closed loop. Like either some of these systems, like they're inside your network. But what's terrifying to me is sort of twofold. One, there's a lot of these devices which now sit outside your network, which can and then communicate back. Like, one of the big ones was not Ubiquity, but they actually you would hook up a security camera. It would go to their cloud source, so it'd reach outside your network, and then pull down firmware updates into your network to update itself. It would push data outside your network, and then it would come back. It would then do pull requests to pull that data back in because they need to record that video up here and then pull it down to your network if you want a local copy. And that is terrifying to me, that you can have them on your network and it pulls down who knows what functionality, and you trust everything along the way. You have to trust the entire supply chain for the device. You have to now trust the repo, which you're using to handle all of their firmware updates, the developers who are patching those, who are pushing them out, and we've never had a bad firmware update on any device which doesn't bring it down. Like, I see Gowrie laughing on that one.
So,
but But I'll finish my thought. Is like it's terrifying to me that pulls down, and for me, that is why I have moved everything over to just a completely separate network. Can access the only overlay there is I'll throw up 2 on my existing access points. So I use Ubiquity. I actually really like Ubiquity as much as people don't like it. I'm a really big fan of it. And that the only overlap is I use the same access points to throw up 2 SSIDs, and that second one is completely gapped. And then the physical network itself is completely separate. So like things like my doorbell, and I do have a smart doorbell. I think it's freaking amazing. And I'll get into that later. But things like that is like, I think having that stuff separate is incredibly important. Gulo.
So as far as like the security and setting things up, if you look at the software development cycles of a lot of these small companies, if you look at these light companies, they started off in somebody's garage. They didn't care about security. They were trying to hit market as quick as they could. And they just slapped together whatever would function that they could give out to their investors as a demo. And then they slapped a price tag on it, a label, and then it went and it hit shelves. It's not until well after the fact that people start to look at their software stacks of what is this? How does this work? How can I make this secure? And they only do that after they've been hacked or after there's been some big news, something, and they can capitalize on it, either of protecting their investment or saying they got hacked, but we can't get hacked because we did such and such and such and such. As far as smart devices, I'm probably the least smart device out of the 3 of you guys, out of all of us, because I have a TV. And that's just because I can't buy a TV that's not smart anymore.
Right?
Sorry, decent TV. I mean, I could go back into a pawn shop and buy a CRT somewhere and hook that up and go.
I mean, you don't have to plug Ethernet into it, though. Like, that's one way. Like, a lot of these smart devices, you can just not hook them up. And then they kind of lose a lot of that functionality.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
okay, I'll argue that to where you shouldn't be plugging in or logging into your Wi-Fi with your smart TV. Go get yourself an external box and plug it in instead, because that at least you can update or replace when the firmware goes up, versus when they're not patching the TVs for years on end. Don't hook your TV up to the internet. Hook up an external box instead that you can actually replace and or control. At least that's my 2 cents worth.
So I'll say on that note, I think it's probably worth denoting that if you have a cheaper or even a mid-range TV, that I would agree with that, right? They're not doing security updates. If you're buying the higher end TVs like a Sony Bravia or any of those high end things, you can probably, they're basically computers, right? So the way I look at it is, if you're going to hook it up to your Wi-Fi and you have an actual, brand that is going to manage the computer in the TV, then I think you don't have to be as worried about that particular smart appliance, as opposed to a refrigerator where all bets are off, right?
I mean, there's a counter to that, and then I'll hand it to Gulo, is the counter to that is yes, but at the point, what type of exploits exist in those systems, and what is the attack? Like, what's the risk profile of that device compared to the other stuff in your house? And I use the example, like, if you have a lot of consumer switches, and again, this is kind of like prosumer. Not many people have like a switch in their house, but there's no SSL certificate. Like, your house doesn't run, and most corporations don't run internal SSL certificates. Like, so you have SSL certificates you're dealing with. Some of these devices just don't even have a login. Or if you have, like a lot of us have, servers, you have like iDRACs and things like that, which are all exposed, and you're not going to move those to like a management network. Again, I know this is like probably getting a little up there, but at a certain point, you almost accept the risk of some of these things, knowing that it's really hard to pivot through an IoT device. And I say that like, yeah.
I was going to say, let's actually focus on the attackability. Hold on, let's let Gulo go, because I always got him off.
Gulo should go.
Okay, as far as TVs go, so I have a Samsung, and it's slightly older, but it was a high-end Samsung when I first bought it. And yes, it receives updates all the time, but Samsung has a notorious problem where their hard drive fills up on the TV and it just works like crap. And there's no way for me to really flush it or fix it other than to go buy a new TV that requires less updates because it's baked into the firmware. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but my TV is the only IoT device that I have that requires internet access. I do have IP enabled security cameras, but they are on a separate air gap network. There's one security server that's connected to my regular network that allows me to view those cameras, but you'd have to pop that security box for me to get that, and that reboots every night, and it reinstalls the operating system every night. So even if you pop that box, you'd have to pop that box every day. As far as switches goes, yeah, I've got switches in my house, and I do use certs on all of my stuff. Um, Granted, they're local certs rather than I didn't go out and pay for them. But anything that is a device that does not need internet access doesn't get internet access in my house. Like my Raspberry Pi that controls all of my lights doesn't have internet access. My switches don't have internet access. My TV requires it. My PlayStation requires it. And my computers require it. But pretty much anything else, if it has, oh, and my cell phones. I probably have I have a half dozen cell phones that I use for different things based on context. But as far as all that goes, segregate your networks, break things out, and set them up. You were talking about iDRACs. All of my iDRACs is on a management network. I probably have a dozen VLANs at home. I have more VLANs than I have physical switch ports. I have a DMZ that's set up that's like guest Wi-Fi. People can connect to that. My TV connects to that. My PlayStation connects to that.
Yes.
I have things segregated specifically for that. Gator brought up Minecraft. I really, really, really want to like Minecraft.
Same.
And it's basically it's an Alexa, it's a Google Home, it's something that I can communicate with. The problem is it still connects out to the internet, and because it sends up my voice and my commands to the internet for processing, I don't like their service. So I'm currently trying to pull pieces and parts out of that to build my own version that does not require the internet access. So all of my smart appliances, minus my TV, are home built. I'm building my own voice commands. I built my own light switches. I will build my own power outlets if I have to. Unlike Gowrie, I'm not afraid of burning my house down because I test them out on my neighbor's house anyway, so it's fine.
I mean, one thing which I don't know, like doing intents, doing all the intents for like Alexa and programming your own, like you're very limited functionality. Like when you get to creating, so an intent is like I intend, like when you write up a lot of like Alexa or Siri, you tend to seed it with these phrases like, I want to know what the weather is. I want to know what this is. I want to know what this is. And you kind of give it a list of what you're expecting, and then it hands it off to the server to kind of like build out the rest of it. And like that's what you're getting with a Siri or an Alexa is you're getting, you know, tons of developers building those things where if you build it yourself or even Minecraft, like you're only going to get what you have. You're not going to be able to like add stuff to a shopping list unless you add that functionality. And then when you pull in a third-party product like Hue Lights, that comes with all of these pre-built intents and actions. So like, that's another thing you compare. It's like you roll your own, much more secure, but you're then trading off like a lot of like big functionality within it. Go on, Gator.
Good. So going back to the whole, what do you classify as an IoT device? And that's how Gula was saying that he separated his network as well. I went through and I classified my phones as an IoT device because when we're talking about talking to a Chromecast, when we're talking to something else, our phones are constantly reaching out, constantly being updated. So I put my tablets, I put my phones all on that network, including just thinking about what else is out there. So for me, it's the Chromecast, it's the Roku, of a couple of these lights are on their own separate network as well. But I make sure those are all on that side. making sure that you then set up your firewall correctly to where I have my NAS, my Synology NAS, controlled on my home network that I want to be able to share my Plex to. Making sure just to poke that IP address and those 1 or 2 ports through, so that then the TV can reach out just to those 2, grab what I need, and then leave everything else the same, is a big deal. And then on top of that, leaving my my security cameras, I think they're like Real Link PoE. They hook up to my Synology, but they're also still trying to reach out to the internet. Blocking that, making sure that, hey, I don't need to see it from the web. I'm at home, or I have my VPN service connected back to my Synology, and I can look at that myself. So really classifying what is an IoT device in your home and making sure that's properly segmented was a big deal that took a few weeks for me to not only physically lay out. I'm using like diagram.net, which is free for folks, or draw.io. It's the same thing. And drawing your network out and figuring out how and where you want things segmented. So it's an alternative to Visio.
That's one nice thing with Ubiquiti is it actually draws that for you, which is nice. If you use it for a DHCP server, a lot of DHCP servers will actually, anything it gives an IP address to, it won't catch everything. The other really, okay, this is one of those like geek out moments, is the other IoT device I found, which has been like my favorite thing. Like I love and hate Kickstarter because I've been burned on it a few times, but there was a device called Monitor.io. And what it does is it indexes everything on your entire network. You can name it, and you can set up listeners or watchers on those devices. So if they go down, it notifies you. If you're having DNS issues, it will monitor for that. But the other thing it does is it reaches out to the internet constantly. And again, it's just pinging servers. Like you can see everything's, they've gone they knew this was going to be such a security central device. You can start seeing like how far away, if there's an issue on your network, like a latency issue, how far away it is, because it takes a measure of all the hops between you and externally and goes, okay, I'm getting 3 hops away before I start having the latency issue. So there's some really, like, as far as like device monitor and network mapping, that's like one I've kind of been loving. It's really cool.
So I like to. One of the things I wanted to bring up was okay, we all agree that the security of these devices is for the most part crap, right? Yeah. And you just have to assume that they're basically easily poppable boxes and that your lights can be hacked. What is your opinion on how much should the average consumer care that a light bulb can be popped, or that, so take the smart doorbell. For example, by the way, can you ring your doorbell from your phone? Please say yes.
Well, it's kind of. You can set the tone off. You can't actually ring the doorbell with it. At least not that I'm aware of. I use the Nest Hello. I don't like the Ring. Nest Ring. I don't like. I have the Hello. I think it's Nest Hello.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, I was wondering, like, what is your risk posture of somebody hacking your doorbell? There's the obvious, they got a foothold on your network, but how did they get into it in the first place? And we can go down that route. But like, let's say someone gets into your doorbell, what can they do to you, right? And I think Mr. Robot has, a scene with this where they and I'm not going to do too many spoilers, but they hack somebody's smart house and they send the speakers blaring and they set the lights going off to make it a rave and they force her out of the house. But
there is one IoT device, and it's an old story, and I can't remember if it's true or not. So if you look it up on Snopes and you burn me for it later, you suck.
Just trust everything Gulo's saying, right?
There was an article I read about one of the smart pets, like, those robotic dogs, robotic cats, murdered a family. And supposedly what had happened, and I've personally done this with my own, like when I had a Roomba, I hacked my Roomba to do something similar, is supposedly the robotic dog was hacked to where that they turned down the infrared settings on it so that it would only be attracted to super hot heat sources. I did this on my Roomba so it would chase my cats around the house. It was actually fun to do, but supposedly the story went something along the lines of the robotic dog jumped into the fireplace, caught fire, and then proceeded to run around setting the house on fire and burn down the
Jeez.
house and killed the family. Now, the reason that they blamed the robotic dog was that the father was found next to a smashed robotic dog with a baseball bat. So that's why they're assuming that it was that did that.
Yeah.
So in certain instances, I mean, PCs have a BIOS. You can start overclocking things and try to burst a PC into flames. You can do the same thing with other devices as well. Granted, a doorbell is going to be low voltage, but it comes back to security cameras. Most smart doorbells have cameras on them. And now people can watch coming and goings of your house. Hue lights, I mean, it's possible you might be able to overclock them and start popping them to set fire to things. So
I
it's
mean,
kind of a
there's not enough voltage going through them to do any damage, right? They're
Yeah.
LEDs. Like you'll pop the LED, but nothing's bad's gonna happen. But what you could do, and this is a good point. You're watching the comings and goings for the doorbell. Your smart devices, you can just monitor their usage, right? So you can know when the light bulb is on, when it's off, and you can you get into someone's network, and if you're able to get that information, you can map their entire day. What do they do? What rooms do they spend their day in? Are they energy hogs? Are they assholes that leave their lights on everywhere in the house all day? Build up that kind of information, and there's a surveillance aspect there that I think is very interesting.
I mean,
even smart refrigerators. If you look at how often the compressor turns on your smart refrigerator and document that, you can tell when somebody goes to the kitchen to open up the refrigerator because there's going to be a temperature increase. And because of that, you can be like, these people are in the kitchen now. They're cooking. They've been cooking in the kitchen for the last hour, blah, 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 and then go from there.
So I have a few comments on this one, which comes down to first the doorbell. One, I think it's good that you have those things outside your network, like as far as on a guest network. It is the easiest feature. I think almost every access point has this ability, like enable guest network and then throw a password on it and throw them on that. And that's for the doorbells. Like the doorbells themselves are remarkably simple. Like they don't run a big enough operating system where they're so like, that one's a hard one, because if you got into that, you'd actually be getting into like Nest, and then you're actually hitting like you're bypassing two-factor, you're bypassing like SSO and like all these things that they have. So like, hard example. But I do have actually a bunch of examples from the past decade, which no one really thinks as IoT devices, but they are absolutely a way I have pivoted through for a remarkable amount of penetration tests, and it's big industrial printers. So on internal corporate networks, they run BusyBox or some flavor of a really stripped down Linux system. Now some run like Wince or Windows CE, which I'm just a miserable experience. But you can like stage, and people go, oh, but they won't install tools. I don't need it to install tools. It runs either Telnet or it runs SSH, and that's all I need, because then I can just start tunneling everything through that. So printers, if you look at any risk attack profile online or any methodology, like printers are at the top of the list because they're never locked down. The password's always admin, or because you just plug them in, no one thinks about it, and throw them on the network. But here's the scariest thing. Almost every one of them, the configuration is either unlocked, but they need to be added to the domain because people will authenticate them and you want the printer to automatically. In so many of these interfaces, like the web interface, you see the username, you see the password, and the password has like the asterisk over it. And it is like, it's like the elite hackers. You right click, inspect, and the full password is in the browser for you to see. It's remarkable.
I've seen it. And this is why, so it's funny because I'll bring up a comment that Taylor in chat said. He said, let me put it this way. The four of you could ruin my life with or without me doing this thing. We live in an age. We live in that age, so F it, right? Locks only keep honest folks out, and this is an interesting thing. Yeah, Gulo said in response to that, yes and no. Pay attention to low hanging fruit, because while locks keep honest people honest, you don't want to just not have locks or have a one pin lock, right? Because it at least increases the amount of time that it takes for someone to get into your door, and that that time is beneficial. If it takes more time for you to be hacked or more time for your lock to be picked, then they'll probably target an easier target, right? There's no reason and this goes back to exactly what Silk was saying. The reason why printers are up there, no one's going to hack. I wouldn't say no one, but very few actors want to spend their, time, and it's precious to them. Very few actors want to spend their time trying to hack a very heavily locked down box when there's a printer on the network. Why bother? Right? If I can hack the printer, I'm going to be able to get everything that anyone ever prints, and that's a treasure trove of information, right? And if those printers are notoriously bad at security, then why am I going to go searching for an ODE to get into your Windows box? Like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to use whatever the lowest hanging fruit is and get it into. And that's why Gulo said you need to pay attention to the low hanging fruit, because that's where it is. And that's why we're on here now talking about IoT devices, as this is the lowest of the lowest hanging fruit. They're probably easy as hell to hack. And the question is, what value is that? Now, that said, he did say, you could do this without knowing my name. We live in that, so F it, right? And I do think this is an interesting question, and one that we've talked about off stream a little bit. And there's a question of that privacy aspect, or how much should the average person worry about being hacked, and like how much thought should they really give to this? We're all on stream right now. People could look us up. There's privacy implications here, and we've obviously done the calculations of this stream is worth more to us than being squirreled away in our corners and nested and being heavily protected by the obscurity of not being on stream every day, right? And so there's a privacy question there, and that's where you have to start to ask the question: well, how much do I value a smart puck, the Google Nest smart pucks, where I can talk and say turn music on in this? Do I value that? I think there's value in that, and the average person probably goes, this is actually convenient. And so I wouldn't, the point of the stream is not to tell you to not use IoT devices, and it's not even to say if you're going to use them you should highly segment your network. You can probably safely put a Google Nest on your network and not worry too much, because Google cares about security, right? And that goes back to if you're going to buy a mid-range TV or a low-end TV, yeah, you might want to think about how you hook that up to your network. But if you're going to buy a higher-end TV, you can probably assess that as being a little more supported, because the big boys are getting, the actual money to worry about the security, and they're much more likely to care about it because it's a bigger issue to them if they get sued. So where was I going with this? Yeah, the so F it, right? That kind of attitude. I think that to an extent, right? I think you can say, so F it, I'm just going to plug in this Google Nest puck into my main network and not worry too much about it. But I wouldn't build a whole home automation system and hook all of that into the same network. If you're going to have a couple, 1, 2, like a Roomba and a Nest puck and maybe a thermostat, I think you're fine. I think you can put that on your main network and do some reasonable things. Make sure, you have a decent password on your Wi-Fi, stuff like that. I don't think you have to worry too much. But if you're going to have a whole home automation network, yeah, you should probably spend a good chunk of time thinking about the security posture of every single device that you put into the house.
I think
it's a risk assessment.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I would agree. I was going to say I think lost my train of thought. Oh, for it, I think when it comes to like trade-offs of privacy and security, I think, oh man, I had two thoughts and they both went at the same time. But I want to spin back to privacy. Yeah, you have to make a risk assessment. And I think for my privacy, I knew the moment I attached my real name to this channel, all of a sudden it was like, okay, you can attach, like, and I had to think of this, think this through, going, okay, if my name is out there, you can attach it to my business. If you attach to my business, you can attach it to my address. But then it hit me like, it's not that if anyone who goes through that information, like who has knowledge to be able to go through that, they're not the type of person who's going to go, I'm going to show up as a house because they know most security people are paranoid. So it's like, either way, that one, I think when you come down to making decisions about your privacy, making decisions about what smart devices, I think you do have to assess like what the company is who makes it. So whether it's Google, whether it's Apple, and then what integrations you have. Also, by the way, has anyone ever, anytime you hear anyone say like, okay, Google in their phone, has anyone just like yelled out something to their phone to see? So like, common game I was playing with friends is anyone who said like, okay, Google, you yell out something. And I was in the car with my father when he said, hey, Siri, and I almost say this because I know I'm going to enable my device. And without thinking about it, I yelled out, Google pornography. And then it hit me. I'm like, I just did this with my father on the call. And he looks at me and I hear his phone repeat it back. I'm sorry, I don't understand. I'm like, oh gosh, what did I just do? Crap.
That's amazing.
So-
No,
That's in your search history now, man. That's not me. That you looked that up, Dad or father-in-law.
there was a hack, and I don't even know if it still works, of where you could get voicemails or something would be playing through your speaker that said, okay, Google, or hey, Siri, at an inaudible level or
Yes.
inaudible frequency, and your phone would recognize it and do X. And that was an actual valid hack. And that's something that I've paid attention to. But as Gowrie and Silk had said, it's all a risk assessment. You have to figure out what you're willing to give up to make sure that to make sure that you're either private or make sure that you don't get hacked. My network is set up more paranoid than most because that's what I do. That's what I build. That's what I design. And because of that, it's like, if my network is a flat network, it's a crap network, and I know how to do this stuff. I know how to automate it. I can automate the entire deployment, and I can blow it up and redeploy it every couple hours, every couple days, whenever I want, and it will just rebuild itself. I have my OSs broken out on VLANs. So my Windows boxes are on a different VLAN than my Linux boxes because I trust Windows less. My gaming boxes are like, my VR setup is on a whole separate VLAN as well because I don't trust Steam and everything else that sits on it for the networking and the security of it. So that exists somewhere else. The caveat to that is the privacy part of it. As Silk was saying, and Gator was saying, now Google or Apple or Amazon now knows everything I say, everything I do. The part that I'm broken with right now is I have home internet. I don't have business internet, which means I have one external IP. If I heavily Google something off of one of my Windows boxes or my gaming box, then like I just re-enabled my PlayStation Plus. So for some of the games that I'm playing, I did that off a special system designed just for those things. Now, all of my Twitter accounts, all of my ads on Google, on any of my boxes now show PlayStation Plus and PlayStation ads because my external IP was the exact same. Yes, I could be using VPNs and breaking things out, but that now my risk assessment doesn't go that far because screw it, they're ads. I don't care that much.
I mean, I will say I disagree. No, I disagree. Like having had to do this with PathCheck, which is like the contact tracing application, and they need to grab. And again, this is all public. is they had to use like Monomo, which is an analytics platform based on security. Like your ISP has some information, but they're not going to get it just based on your IP address. What's happening is all of these devices start sharing authentication mechanisms, like whether it's Google or Facebook or Apple. There's a reason why they all want their SSO everywhere, because then that authentication is what can track you between all your different devices, and it hides it from the ISP. Like the ISP is getting less and less and less information with DNS over HTTPS, a lot of Cloudflare's work, which is great. Is they're getting less and less information, but you're now trading it in these weird ways of like the single sign-ons. And a lot of the IoT devices support these single sign-ons. So now the big companies are getting this information. But for the most part, everything I've seen within Google, and even Google Analytics, which just invades so much of all these devices, they don't care or necessarily even want to know, or in some ways, some of the compliances and frameworks don't even let them know who you are. You are a ID in their system, which is attached to traffic information, and then they can make the intelligent decisions for your ad. So like this is kind of went down a tangent, but I do think more and more it's harder and harder to protect your privacy. But in some ways, as long as they are private in their snooping, I am actually willing to make that trade, because I don't want to get and I don't want to get ads which aren't relevant to me. Like I'm forced to get ads so often. Like, and I can put ad blockers on, and there's some really good ones so you can avoid them on platforms. But when you do get ads, I would rather have them relevant to me than getting all sorts of weird ones. And I'm sick, by the way, of getting horror ones on YouTube. I don't like horror. I don't want to watch horror. Yeah. But sitting in bed at 2 a.m. and getting like, womp womp, Billy, ah! And you're like, God, I'm about to fall asleep right now.
What have you been Googling?
That's exactly what I was thinking. I'm like,
Billy,
do you have like a Pornhub thing? So you have a lot of ads that are showing up, and your wife is like, I'm not really sure you should be using the internet anymore.
Funny.
Yeah, I visit Gulo's OnlyFans to watch him solder.
Between
I
that,
mean,
it
don't we all?
reminds me of that. Oh, absolutely! It reminds me of that one time that Bob was at a timeshare resort that just put in Wi-Fi, and they didn't have the clients separated, and then there was a man-in-the-middle attack that happened to where every single picture was replaced with a nun going when somebody was surfing XYZ site or XXX site. It was fantastic. That IP address never came back, according to Bob.
Didn't RenderMan do something similar at, I think it was Hope?
Okay,
where
tell me about it.
He hacked something where it was doing an image replacement, so he replaced every image on the internet with a picture of himself.
Of himself, yes, I remember this story.
So, it was actually one of my favorite pranks that a friend of mine ever did. We were hanging out. A friend of mine would have parties in his house, a couple times a year, and he had a couple of those smart picture frames, and they had it set up. And we Googled it. It was the one that you could plug a USB into, and it would download all of the pictures off of it immediately, and then start putting it in. So it was an automated task where all you had to do was plug it in, wait for the light to stop blinking, and then all of your pictures would be updated. He went when he wasn't paying attention. We distracted our friend so that this guy could go put a USB into it, download all the pictures, took it home, photoshopped himself into the background of every picture, and then brought it back and updated all of the pictures during the next party. Went completely unnoticed for a year and a half. Completely unnoticed for a year and a half, I swear to God. And then one day, I forget, I think his wife found it. She was just looking at the frame, and they were like, why is that guy in the background of our wedding picture with a stupid face? They weren't there. What is that? Wait a minute.
He's in every one.
Oh my God. And it was in every single, I'm talking hundreds of pictures. right? Like he spent time over the course of a year updating like 100 pictures and photoshopping himself into the background. It's the best prank I've ever seen in my life.
Fantastic.
Now
I did
imagine if that frame was smart and hooked up to the internet, you could pull that prank on any one of your friends without having to go to their house. It would be amazing.
I think it's time to get
added
picture frames for Christmas.
one goatsy image to my boss's automate smart picture frame thing, and it was just one, and it would only pop up for a few seconds before it would switch, and she had a couple hundred pictures on there.
Oh, it's even worse. It's horrible.
I'm equal opportunist. I don't care. You're my boss. You have to suffer.
Oh gosh.
Can we appreciate? Is that a paper mache Baby Yoda?
That is a paper mache. That is a.
I guess it's Grogu, right?
Pinata.
Yes, it is a Baby Yoda pinata.
That is amazing. I love that.
So I'll spin back to something we talked about, kind of IoT related, but something we were talking right before stream, which is terrifying. So I had done a short on this, and someone asked me the question, like, how do you feel about a lot of the smart cars, the ones which are now like have computers, they auto drive and things like that? And what about hackers hacking into them? And my immediate thought was like, you know what? I know there's some instances. I know there's been some attacks on them. There's been a few where they've gotten access into the CAN bus network to be able to do stuff. But like, those would be really hard attacks to do. And I started researching on the wired attack. And I remember, I think it was Chris Valasek, and I don't remember the other person. It's linked on the other video. But how they actually went about doing it, and I would consider these smart devices, like things that had a computer that never should have had one, like things like the smart grid, and there's other stories there. But it was remarkably simple. It wasn't dropping 0 days. It wasn't bouncing lasers off the moon or something like that. There was a wireless network that was attached to the multimedia system with a random password that was set while the system was booting up. And while the system was booting up, the random seed was the exact same. So you had the same password across everything. You logged in, and then you're into the multimedia system. And two things here. One, wireless, you had to be local to the car. But they also had another system where they pushed that same password up to their cloud infrastructure so you can control your radio over the cloud. So, which is, as we've discussed on this channel before, cloud is just another person's system. So they logged into that. You're in the multimedia system. CAN bus is way over there. But the system had a read-only controller into the CAN bus network, which would pull data back to the media system that you could display, which they left a debug port open, which let you overwrite firmware and then overwrite firmware to make it not a read-only controller, but a full-blown controller into the CAN bus network. And to this day, that terrifies me because someone in security would have looked at this. Like anyone in security would have said, you guys forgot to turn off debug. You shouldn't have this controller hooked up. But it hits me as there's not really any, because it's such new technology, there's not regulation around it. Like we haven't put the same safeguards in place from a framework perspective to govern, like you have to keep this part of the network air gapped. What's your guys' thoughts on these?
I have a great thought on this, right? And it's exactly what you said with regards to regulation. What is the difference between a Tesla and 737? Real question. What's the difference? Right? A 737 is a highly automated piece of very advanced avionics technology. Those things can fly themselves. They can take off themselves. They can land themselves. What is the difference between that and a Tesla that claims to be able to drive itself?
The difference is regulation.
No, the difference is regulation, right? At 737, there is a requirement to keep the media center completely air gapped from the rest of the networked thing. There was a whole conversation about it. I think it was after one of United's planes got hacked. The media center got hacked by someone, and that guy promptly went to federal prison. But there was a whole discussion. United talked about, the federal aviation requirements require that the media system be completely air gapped from the rest of the plane's automation, because there's an onboard network. You can get to the internet. Before they put those things into those planes, I wouldn't say before they put it in, but eventually the regulation caught up with it. And it's because aviation is one of the most highly regulated things in society. Where's the
Well,
regulations for self-driving cars?
Mhm.
What,
well,
show them to me.
so as far as that goes, I have a couple of points. As far as the regulations goes, I'm going to toss Renderman under the bus yet again. This was a couple of years ago. He was testing out the autopilot landing something, and he found bugs and hacks into the automated landing of planes. And he went to the airlines, he went to the FAA, and he said, "This is not safe. I can hack into this from the airport and crash planes."
Hmm.
There were proof of concepts and all this other stuff, and they were sweeping him under the rug. They're like, "No, this is going to get deployed because it costs X amount of money. We are already in the process of deploying this," and gag order. And then it got released at DEF CON, and he's like, "Somebody please help me to get this fixed. This people will die because of this." Um, yeah, and Gator's now posting that talk. I don't know if
Mhm.
they actually fixed it or not. Um, but that is a good example of like closed loop security, closed source security of they would rather silence you than actually fix bugs.
I
Oh,
As
mean,
for
far as
sure.
car
And
hacks goes, the ones that we used to do is the tire pressure sensor, tire pressure sensor gauge. That would tell you if you had a flat tire. That was usually a Bluetooth or some other frequency that you could hack into to gain access to the CAN bus in certain cars. There's an entire car hacking village at DEF CON that will go far deeper into all of this stuff. But you also have the stealing of keys where they do the man in the middle. Most people keep their car keys close to their front door. And because of that, they can do frequency hopping and they do a man in the middle to then steal your Tesla, start your Tesla, and then drive off. Um, I did a pen test at a power plant, and they had it's like 12 or 13 firewalls separating their automation controls versus from the internet and like their office network. But they had one piece on there where they had on their engineering system, their engineering computer, they could set schedules for their automated systems in the power plants. And I found that scheduler and I brought everyone in and we had a meeting and all the engineers sat down. And I said, "You have a hole in your security. This goes against your regulations. You can't do this."
Mhm.
And the engineers were like, "But we only do scheduling for that, and that's all it's used for." And I looked at him dead in the eye and I go, "Do you only set scheduling, or can you only set scheduling?" And that was when the oh shit light bulb turned on. Of
and I want to walk something back. And just to be clear, my claim here isn't that the planes are sophisticated and the regulations are so tight around them that they're unhackable. That's not my statement. All my biggest statement was the FAA has real security
Mhm.
requirements for any automation that goes in an airplane because it is a highly regulated industry. Those same security requirement, and that's why I asked in the beginning, what's the difference between a 737 and a Tesla? Drives itself, right? In some
Mhm.
way, shape, or form, it can drive itself. It has the summon feature or whatever.
Yep.
You have human people. There's no difference, right? And this is a great example of an IoT device where you have the media center, you have all kinds of wireless devices, the Bluetooth tire gauges, things like that. Where is the actual federal or whatever requirements that state, any media system can't have connectivity with anything that can possibly drive the car,
Oh,
right?
this is such an interesting one because with regulation, regulation can't keep up. Like, that's one of the
Right.
biggest things. We're building new technology, new devices, new IoT devices. We are connecting the internet, and I'm using that as a global term. We are connecting network connectivity to devices that never ever were supposed to have it. And this goes into like custom protocol stacks and industrial control system fuzzing and SCADA fuzzing and all of these things. But we never intended it. And because of that, regulation hasn't caught up. In some ways, though, regulators and compliances can't keep up. Because this is why, like, if you look at like some of the biggest frameworks, high trust, NIST, ISO, like, they're not, this can't have connectivity. The framework will have controls in it, like, you need to establish segmentation on your network or segmentation on your device. But it's not declarative. It's not prescriptive. It's just here is the control. And then you have to write a policy to satiate that control.
Yeah.
And then you have to write procedures to satiate the policy. And then you have to grab evidence to show that you're following the procedures, which then adhere to the policy, which fulfills the control. But here's the problem. You say you're going to segment your network, and I'll use the energy sector as a great example because this is another one of those ones close to my heart of something I worked on. And this was, again, 8 years ago. A lot of vulnerability has been closed. We went to a whiteboard. We talked about, just like Gulo said, here is the smart grid. Again, here is what governs our grid. Here's the internet. Here's the corporate firewall. Here's the DMZ. Here's another firewall. Here's this. Here's this. Here's this. Here's another firewall. Here's an air gap. Here's a physical separation. Here's another firewall, another air gap, another blah, 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 all the way through. It took 2 hours to lay out the entire network. And then he stops, said, here's what we need to do. And the whole device was built to do something actually really cool. It was so you at home could make educated decisions of when to run your appliances. Most people don't know this. Your electric bill, how much you pay for electricity changes throughout the day. At peak hours, it costs more. At low hours in the middle of the night, it costs less. So you could make the decision to say, you know what? I want to run my dishwasher at this time because it's going to cost me less. I want to run my crypto mining servers, my SafeMoon servers at this time of night because it will cost less. And it made you you can make that education decision. Now, in order to do that, that device needed to hook up to a smart meter, a smart power meter right outside your house, and take that huge network. And that smart meter needs to connect from your house, bypassing all the security back into the smart grid and bypass everything that took all the regulators years and years to do. And they could justify it because the smart meter is part of the control network, which is still considered gapped because it's not hooked up to your house network. Your smart meter isn't hooked up to your house network. It still adheres to the control, here's to the policy, here's to the procedure, all of that. But it is a terrible idea because we hacked into Zigbee. Like, we hacked into these things, and it is amazing to me that we can make these decisions to cross this huge gap just in a bubble. And it's not hundreds of people making the decision. It's one, maybe two. And it's one person making the decision, which is a business decision, and then another person going, is that secure? And they go, yeah, no. And he goes, well, we need to do it by next month. So
yeah, it depends on how much money you want to make. Right.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead, Gula.
So thank you for reminding me. I couldn't remember SCADA systems. That's what I was trying to remember. But you were talking about the power grid. Yes, there's regulations and there's separation. But if you take a look at like power vaults that are in the big cities that are outdated SCADA systems that have no security, that were built decades ago, but they would have to tear apart the road in downtown to replace those. And they're tens of millions of dollars piece of equipment to rip those out, to replace those. No one wants to do that. They're going to try to regulate around doing that, even though that they're incredibly hackable and they're unsafe. But because of the cost and the city cost and also the power company cost, they're not going to replace those. They're going to try to regulate around those and build whatever they can to justify not doing that. And just like you were talking with the smart meters, it's one guy that's making the decision, and they're like, I don't think it's secure, but we can't really do anything about it, so we're just going to push forward.
Or they just
So
don't ask themselves the question at all. Right?
Yeah.
That's
so they
way
don't.
more likely.
So that's one of the things I appreciate going back to DEF CON and the different villages, because there is a car hacking village. There is an ICS village. And because there are people finally looking at this and starting to go to these talks and say, hey, this is another industry that we should be applying what we've already learned in computers, period. But instead, you've got a manufacturer saying, I make cars. I'm going through and monitoring X network. And hey, we just want to internet enable it. That's where we have to be able to be passionate. We have to be able to reach out and say, hey, there are things that need to be checked here. There are standards, or we need to help create standards to make sure that these are more secure before they go out.
I actually have something. What so regulations, governments, these are all things that slow down progress. I'm not saying they're necessarily bad, but if we take a look at like programmers, like phone apps or apps that like my smart TV has an HBO app, it has an Amazon app, all of these are pushed to market faster and faster so that we can push the envelope of technology. If
Right.
we slow down to create the security and do this mindfully, how much is that going to impact how fast technology is developing and how fast it's growing? Because if we have to slow down the process to secure these things, then we're now focusing on the technology now rather than the technology of the future, and we're not able to push the envelope as quick.
Right. So
So
it's completely untenable. It's completely untenable, and that's why it'll never happen. And that's why this is the world we live in, where velocity will stay high forever, and things will just be perpetually less and less secure. And this is, I would say, less and less secure until you have big boys like Google and I guess the other home automation. There will be mega giant companies that weasel their way into every single one of these systems, and they become the de facto security experts because they control the authentication system. That's why it's like a single sign-on and stuff like that. They will force the security requirements on these manufacturers, because in order to sell your light bulb, you have to integrate with the one or two most common home automation networks types things, right? So this is why the regulation aspect of this, and I sorry to harp on the regulation, for the right where regulation matters is when you have life or death scenarios. That's why aviation is highly regulated in many of those regards, and that's why I specifically pointed what's the difference between a Tesla and a 737, because that is an area where there has to be. But even, and to Silk's point, this is fun. I was reading. For fun, I was reading NIST's secure development framework. Like, how do you do? How does NIST?
So, hold on,
Yeah.
I'm going to jump in and then hand it right back to you. It's one
Yeah.
control in the cybersecurity framework. It's one control. You need an SDLC. That's it.
Yeah.
Your whole policy and procedures and everything is declared in one control. Sorry, go on.
Yeah. Well, and this is funny because within that, secure development lifecycle, or I think they call it SSDF, Secure Software Development Framework. There's a requirement or a statement that software developers will do dynamic testing, aka fuzzing. They will fuzz their own software before they release it. But that's literally it. That is all they say, is you will fuzz it. They don't say how. They don't say what's effective. They don't say, what is sufficient levels of fuzzing. You could like run one dynamic test and call it fuzzed, right? So they don't actually dictate what these things are. However, and this goes back to what Gulo's question was, are we actually going to try and slow things down? No. That's the reality. It's not going to happen. No regulation is ever going to slow these technological advances down. No one is, no regulation is going to prevent someone from putting out a really stupid smart device that gets someone killed. Those will get settled in lawsuits, right? What will happen is as you develop the language and the requirements around how to do secure software development, you get things like NIST's SSDF that says you will fuzz. And then hopefully an entire sector of the economy will build up around those requirements. You will have services that say, you don't know how to do this, but I'm really, really good at doing this. So let me work with you to help integrate this particular testing infrastructure into your thing so you can meet this requirement. And then you can advertise yourself as one of the most secure because we worked with this business that does effective testing. Microsoft doesn't talk about this, but they run defensive fuzzing against their own kernel, right? They fuzz the kernel. They've been doing it since at least Windows 7, if not earlier than that. And that's why Windows 10 is considered a relatively secure operating system. They found you can go read up the reports on it. Yeah, go read up the reports. It's leaps and bounds.
I don't care what anyone says on it. It is every iteration of Windows has gotten better and better. Now,
and it's gotten significantly more secure.
I'm jumping in because you were like, everything you said I agree so much with. I think there is first thing just to throw out there is there's such a difference between IoT life and death as far as there's security for certain devices that just don't matter. It's not a priority. It doesn't need to be a priority. Whereas, a car does. But what you were saying, it's funny. You said dynamic scanning. And you said fuzzing, but I hear dynamic scanning, and I go, okay, the web interface needs to have a DAST run against it, a dynamic application scanning tool run against it, like Burp Pro or NetSpark or insert your Qualyses or any of them. That, bam, I can run. It's a full-blown, huge stack of industrial control system, blah, blah, blah. And all I have to do is run a DAST tool against the web service of it, and I would fulfill that control, even though I didn't fuzz anything else. Check in the box. So hold on. There's one other one though, with the because it's such a beautiful thing. You said with the growth of these industries and the big boys taking over, or even not taking over, regardless, but them becoming more popular. I sympathize with Gulo because in VR, it's a gong show. Everyone's doing their own thing. There's very little. Here's the $5 word: standardization. There is very little standardization, and you can't regulation will drive standardization of when you need to do something. Here is your methodology. We have it remarkably good for web, and we have it remarkably great for network of laying out a methodology. But the standards for testing certain devices don't exist. We have gotten there with mobile, and that has been remarkably difficult to do. We are getting there with IoT, and we are getting there with industrial control systems, but we're coming out with new devices like medical devices and IoT devices like that, and there's just the standardization around them has become weird. Same thing with home, like your lights. When lighting first came out, there was 8 different protocols we were using, from Wi-Fi to Zigbee to, oh goodness, there's 4 other ones. It is remarkable that there's no standardization, and standardization will help drive security. Gulo, all you.
So, and this may aggravate some people, but I also find this issue with the education system. If we're dragging so far behind on the regulations, going and taking classes, college courses being updated for what different types of fuzzing it is that we should be doing, they're lagging behind as well, because the adoption rates of changing curriculum to stay with technology is so far behind. It's why I don't hire somebody directly out of school unless they severely impress me with something. If they have job experience and they just graduated, cool, I'll talk to you. But if you're straight out of school, I usually won't even talk with you because generally the knowledge that you have is at least 3 to 5 years behind. Now, Sook made a point on VR. The I kind of like the Oculus. I want to play with the Quest, but honestly, I won't because now it has to be tied to a Facebook account, and I refuse to do that.
Yep.
100% hell no. Now, as far as regulation goes, I've worked for two different VR companies, and I've helped consult for a dozen or so other VR companies. And the generalization is from motion to photon, from when I move to when it shows up on my headset, is 20 milliseconds or less. Anything above that, and people get sick because they can tell the difference and then they throw up in VR. The amount of companies that look at that 20 milliseconds and says 30 milliseconds is only 10 milliseconds more, no one can tell the difference. No, everyone can tell the difference. People will get sick in your application, in your game. For the love of God, follow what people have tested. It's tried and true. Is it a standard? No, but only idiots will be like, I don't have to abide by that because mine does such and such and such and such, and people won't get sick. I will get sick, and I will swear at you and send you nasty emails.
Yeah, I'm waiting for him to speed up. I still get sick in VR. I really, really, really want to love it, but man, I get motion sickness on a million things.
And
I'm a VR engineer. I still get sick in VR. I've been a VR engineer for almost a decade now, and I still get sick. I'm one of the very few people, I think it's 20% of people that never get over their motion sickness in VR. And I'm one of them, yet that's my industry. That's what I work on. The benefit to that is I'm a great test dummy for, hey, we have this new mechanic. Let's go test it on Gulo and see if he throws up in the office.
yeah, nice. Yeah, no, it's sad, and we'll jump back. I have an Oculus, and the day they announced that it was forcing integration with Facebook, never came back out of the box. Will never come back out of the box. It makes me sad because it was fun. It was a nice little thing that I could pull out every now and then and play with. Now the question though is, yeah, I know. As I was saying it, I was like, no, I want those words back. Anyway, so real question though, what platform do you recommend then at this point, Gula?
For VR?
Yeah.
Personally, I'm still using the Vive, but the index is supposed to be better. My issue with the index is the tracking is better, the headset is better in general. The controllers are too small because I have really big hands.
Yeah, you
So
do.
that's why I'm still on the Vive. So I'm on the Vive Pro. Inside out tracking, you've got like HPs, you've got like the reverbs. The reverbs are super nice. I'm still not a fan of the inside out tracking because I don't think that. So the difference between that is you have outside tracking that broadcasts light down, whether it's Oculus Constellation or the Vive lighthouses, or you have inside out tracking where the headset is tracking your environment around you to determine where you're at in time and space.
Right.
Inside out tracking is getting better, but I still disagree with how it functions. There's issues where your controllers, if your headset can't see your controller, if I'm looking this way and I'm holding my controller here, it can't track it. And for some of the shooting games where I'm like Wild West, both sides just pulling the trigger doesn't work so well. So I'm still a fan of the stationary stuff like the Index and the Vive. But inside out tracking is the future. That's where everything is going, and it's just how it's going to work. It is getting better though.
I'm excited for when, again, I'm not an Apple fanboy, and he says this, and then I look around my office and going, crap, I've
an Apple
become
fanboy.
one. I'm an Apple
He's an Apple
fanboy. You know what it is? I buy into the fact that they own the hardware, they own the operating system, they own the App Store. I actually like that because while it closes off innovation, I do believe that, it also means it is remarkably easy for them to control a lot of security and privacy when they integrate within iCloud. You get iCloud, you don't get anything else. Like, I know everyone's like, I see everyone just immediately like, no, I want to jump in here. But speaking of VR though, Apple is not an industry trendsetter. They're not a trailblazer. Look at the iPhone or going from the Zune. They sat back, they let the industry work out the bugs, and then they released a product which just excelled into it. And I can't wait till they do that with VR and things like a smart car. But VR especially, I think it's going to be interesting when they jump in. I think it's going to be really cool.
They've done it.
What do you mean they've done it?
Apple, they don't have their own VR headsets, but they are VR compatible. They flew me to New York for their VR launch, and I built the holograms that they used at the VR launch for the Apple iMac Pro, whatever thingy, like 4 or 5 years ago. They've been in VR and have been capable of doing VR for a while. I've worked on a couple of teams that have made VR experiences and games for the Mac.
I'm saying
they don't have their own headset yet, but they are. Last I heard, and this is probably only a rumor, is that they are in development of their own version, their own headsets.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So I want to catch up on a second on the Oculus. I think is taking the world by storm to where how much money Facebook has made by buying Oculus and then selling the consoles so cheaply. It's absolutely incredible. If you watch 1 or 2 VR channels, they are taking the world by storm, including putting a whole bunch of incentives for people to make exclusives for Facebook. So now that it's $200-$300 to be able to get yourself a headset, I'll say before Facebook bought Oculus, I bought an Oculus, the first one, to where I was able to play. It's fantastic, right? Started looking at the Oculus 2, but that's when Facebook bought it and then forced everyone to have to switch to a Facebook account. I'm still running on an Oculus account and will for another year. And then after that point, I'm going to look at side loading whatever I can. The resolution looks so good on the Oculus 2. I've set up, in fact, with a buddy, Ginger, was able to go through and set up a fake Facebook account and be able to have things staying there. As long as you put on 2-factor authentication with a fake name, you risk the chance of losing your stuff, but you can use it. It just depends on if you want a Facebook device now in your house. So at that point, I had something else, but I forgot about it. I'll turn it over.
Is it about me being an Apple fanboy?
So as far as Oculus goes, the Oculus, I actually really liked the Oculus, the original Oculus. I have one. It's sitting in a box up in my closet because I'm not going to tie it to any Facebook account because hell no. But there is a marked difference between the Oculus and like the Oculus Quest. So the Quests are Android devices. They're pretty much cell phones that are attached to those, and then you have to load applications onto them. And then they're more of a mobile VR platform. I really dislike those because the amount of processing power and the amount of graphics drastically decreases with these systems compared to running with something tethered like an HP, an Acer, a Vive, an Index, any of those. If you're running a standalone system, you have to realize that the graphics are far worse. And this was something that I realized about PlayStation and even Xbox VR. When you start developing for those, if you were developing on computers before, you now have to take your shaders down. You now have to decrease the amount of everything because those systems can't compete with the computers that are constantly getting upgraded. Now, they're great VR experiences, and for the most part, generally what I tell everyone when we're first setting up VR is people cannot tell the difference between bad VR and good VR because no one's really experienced good VR. If you've run through any of my stuff or any of my builds, you've seen good VR. But most people haven't. I've only demoed, I don't know, several thousand people around the world, and they can't tell the difference. But there'll be a point in time where people are like, this was really crap. Why did we even put up with this? And then this is when regulations are going, not even regulations. This is where industry standards will hit. And companies now have to meet those industry standards because people will be like, they will demand it. And when they demand it, it will happen. And that's when the actual technology will slow down. When the people actually start demanding it, is when the technology slows down enough for them to hit those demands.
I'm
So
curious.
now now
Yeah,
I think we need to do a VR stream from Gulo's workshop.
It's funny you say that, because that was about what I was to say. Is like, I really want to do one now, and I was going to ask chat, is, would you guys want to do a VR stream next week? The second one, I had something which was going to be, accessibility. I wanted to ask Gulo, so accessibility is something we just recently had to do for a couple of our clients. Accessibility is like, making sure that the website is accessible by blind, making the website is accessible by other people with different languages, like things like that, which there are security implications for some of the accessibility features. Like, for instance, you could have a button get leaked where it's audible even though it's not visual. Like, there's certain things like that. But do you think that slows down the VR industry, or has that hit? Like, things like even simple things which have started hitting in games, and I don't think it's a standard, but things like colorblind. Here's a snippet of information. Is like, I'm red green colorblind. So like, it's really helpful with games like Halo. I love Halo, but that was so difficult. But has that entered into VR space accessibility, and does that slow things down?
In some instances, yes. Now, I've demoed people from a 2-week-old baby, which I got in trouble for. I and the father got in trouble for, because the mother was off doing something else, and we're like, we'll put a headset on the baby.
Never a dull moment with Gulo. Do not leave your children with Gulo.
Yes, I'm not to be trusted. All the way to like 90-year-olds. I've also demoed blind people in VR. And we were in Boston, and there was this couple. She was legally blind, and they were playing dice, and they had these giant dice that she would hold up, and she could kind of see them when she held them up to her face, and they were playing that in line. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, so you're blind? And she's like, yeah, I can see light, and that's about it. I'm like, cool. I'm going to show you how to play this game while you're blind. And I walked her through exactly what she should do. And I put her and her husband in at the same time, and she kicked his ass. Nice. She could not see anything, but she could hear, and she could fire faster than he could, because she was just pumping the guns faster and faster and faster. And she decimated him. I was so happy. That was one of my happiest moments in VR, of watching somebody that was legally blind completely own somebody that had full sight. And it wasn't even, she was almost like 3 times his score. It was freaking amazing.
A similar story is when the Wii came out. My at that time, 94, 95-year-old grandparents played Wii bowling. And at that age, they're not lifting up a bowling ball. And that was it was the coolest experience. Like, it was the first time. Wii was the first time where I was like, you got into the game, like you got physically involved with the game. It was like almost like the soft step to VR. And the one we were just cracking up about, I got a call from her the next day saying that her elbow hurt from bowling. Yeah. And it was like from Wii bowling. It's like, oh, it's so awesome.
So
I remember. God.
Along with those lines, I think everybody's got a Wii-related story when it comes to anything sports, and one of them is making sure that you have enough space to do it, right? So in the living room,
many broken TVs.
Broken TVs was one deal. That never happened to our house, but we also made sure to get the silicone wraparound, so you're able to hold on to these things, right? But even with that, if you're swinging this thing, it can make a sound if you hit something, right? So there is a video we were going through, and says, hey, check out our console, blah, blah, blah. We zoom back from somebody demoing it, and my brother is just swinging, going out. I think he was playing tennis, and just whipping it. Another sibling walks across the room, not paying attention, and all you hear is this crack, and then right onto the couch, and then the video cuts. Nice. Just an audible, oh my God, what was that?
So, I'll tell a story. Then we should get back to IoT devices. I remember And this is when I think that I realized that Nintendo is truly the OG of video games, and no one will ever convince me that there is a better company that makes video games. No one will ever convince me of this. My mother never played video games. I mean, I think she was in Spain in the Air Force when Pong came out, and and like they were at the bar playing Pong, but she never really engaged with video games beyond that. When the Wii came out and she was playing a little bit of Wii Sports, she's looking at it and she's like, the thing I hate about video games is having my hands attached to a controller and all of the controls. She's like, she goes, this I'll play this if they keep making video games that use and are like somewhat active and get you involved in the game, she's like, I could see myself playing that. I was just like, Nintendo is way ahead of almost everyone else in being able to bring this to a consumer market, right? People have done this before. They just hadn't brought it and made it good enough to bring to a consumer market.
Yeah, we need to talk video games. That. On another, let's do that. Next week we will do we'll do hacking in video games. I think that's a good one. There's actually quite a few hacks we can talk about. I know I have a fun history on that. I'm sure Gulo does as well. So let's cut this topic because there's so much more to talk about, and I immediately want to jump into it.
So I want to bring it back. I'm going to bring it back around to like months ago. And for anyone watching that hasn't subscribed, please subscribe, because at some point in time in the future, we are going to hack a bidet.
Yes.
I did find one.
Found one?
Gulo finally identified the bidet. Sweet.
I feel like at one point there's a thing I thought about putting on the stream, which is because I had like affiliate links and I just decided to stop using them because they're just a pain and they're annoying, and like it's not that big. But there was like a buy me a coffee thing, which a lot of people have been doing, and I don't need the money, so I don't really want to say buy me a coffee, but we could be like buy us a bidet. Just put that as the link. Buy me a bidet.
Yeah,
or
guys,
a hacker, buy a bidet.
We spent a long time discussing this, and we wanted to we didn't want to get a low end IoT bidet to hack because it just wouldn't be that interesting. So we were like, oh, what's the middle range? No, it's really difficult to find an IoT bidet without them costing like many hundreds of dollars. There was this smart toilet that cost like $8,000, and we were like, yeah, we're not going to buy an $8,000 toilet just to take it apart. I mean, I really want to, but I also can't afford that, So
you might have to start the buy me a bidet.
When it goes from like $50 spigot sprayer on your toilet to a fully electronic, heated, plumbing invested monstrosity for thousands of dollars.
I mean, you know what? Between the urinal cakes and the toilet ones and the poop comments on my channel, I feel like it. You know what? Just embrace it. Just become the. There was all right. Quick segue, and I'm gonna pull it back. I was on Security Weekly, which was really cool, and it was from the Hack Naked video. They had reached out. In one of the questions they asked, they're like, if you wrote a documentary, what would the title of it be? And so they asked 5 questions. They asked like, if you were a serial killer, like what would your weapon be? And I wasn't prepared for any of these things. Like one of the ones they asked, oh gosh, I didn't even know they had these questions. I felt so stupid.
Are you serious? Oh no!
I know. So they asked me like, who would your celebrity parents be? And I froze because I'm like, I don't know any celebrities off the top of my head, and none which I would want as a parent.
Living,
so I said
dead
like,
or fictional.
Yeah, dead or yeah, you know them right off the top. And I'm like, Laurel and Hardy. Like just because I thought that would be hilarious. But they asked me documentary. So I came up I'm on the fly, and I'm like, oh, I need to answer fast. What's your documentary? The Naked Urinal Cake Hacker. So it's probably appropriate that we just, please buy us a bidet. We want to invest in a bidet, and it would be, it's probably going to be an ongoing thing. And I'm sorry, but not sorry at the same time. Buy me a bidet. That's going to be it. That's.
We're gonna have to set it up in Gulo's workshop so that we can do the bidet hacking and VR stream one day.
Oh, I see what you did there. Gulo,
I'm still going to attempt to supplement the plumbing on the bidet like Mythbusters style, to see if I can blow a mannequin off of a toilet.
It's gonna be a potato gun bidet.
I was gonna say, wait a second. Is this a mannequin or is this a blow up doll? Because those are
no.
two totally different things.
I mean, the
I
doll will
was
blow
going to
up.
use the blow up doll, but I'm pretty sure normal bidet would probably work for that. And as far as a potato gun goes, that defeats the purpose of a bidet because that's just reinserting stuff.
Jokes
It's
on
reverse
you.
hack.
I'm into
Reverse
that.
Oh man, we're here. We've arrived.
We have arrived. And with that, probably a good spot to start wrapping up. We'll close things up with Gator, and then we'll stick around for like a minute afterwards to take a look at chat. Gator, let's wrap it up.
So, all right. Long story short, one way or another, if you're using IoT devices in your house, at least segment it to where you're putting it on the guest network versus your host devices. Sounds like I'm going to get schooled a bit, which is great. I'm always up for a learning opportunity, learning about ACLs, and maybe we'll be able to make a video on that. Otherwise, VLANing, subnetting, just turn on your guest network, throw things there, and make sure to go love your hacker family.
Aaron?
Oh, it's my turn. Yeah, I think before you start pumping all your house full of IoT devices, consider do you really need your light bulbs to be IoT, or do you want your switch to be IoT, right? Because the fewer IoT devices you have in your house, the smaller the footprint that you have. And I think keep that in mind. You don't want everything to be a smart device. You want critical pieces, or maybe one switch in your house, not every switch. You just got to think about the convenience aspect. And there is a cost to this, obviously, but the privacy perspective, minimize the number of computers in your house, can minimize your risk. That's my rule of thumb. What's up, Gulo?
Risk assessments. Figure out what you're willing to do. You don't have to be as paranoid as us, or you can be more paranoid as us. It's just what you feel comfortable sharing and doing. Identify those and build it. Have fun building it. Ask questions. Get stuck. There's tons of people out there that are willing to help continue hacking.
Hack it up.
So with that, I'll wrap us up, which is, again, there's so many IoT devices out there. So many of them are so much fun. Next week, we are diving into hacking video games and VR. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and hack on.